New details on a series of bizarre attacks. Dozens of unexplained illnesses, including head injuries, forced the U.S. to bring home diplomatic staff from China and the U.S. Embassy in Cuba. Speculation at the time was that it was some sort of sonic attack. But now the scientist who led the investigation tells the New York Times the main culprit is likely some kind of microwave weapon. CNN's Patrick Ottman is following the story from Havana. So, Patrick, what happened at the U.S. Embassy that led authorities to suspect that it was indeed an attack? And now we're talking about these, a microwave weapon.
It's still very much a diplomatic mystery, but let me walk you through what is a very complicated case. It all began November 2016, right after the U.S. presidential election, and that is when U.S. diplomats based here in Havana said they begin to experience these really strange symptoms, often at night, sometimes while they're in bed, asleep in their homes or their hotel rooms here in Cuba, and they said that they would feel nausea, hear loud sounds, hearing loss, but if they got up out of bed, if they left the room where they were in, it would stop. If they walked back into where they had felt this incident, this attack as they described it, it would start again. So they felt that they were being targeted with some sort of mysterious beam of energy. Initially, they complained to Cuban authorities about what they felt they were being targeted with sonic weapons, and these are weapons that do exist, usually used for crowd control. But experts consulted by CNN at the time, said that sonic weapons really don't work like that. They don't usually cause someone to hear a noise, and they're much too large to be used in this capacity. Now we have scientists that have met and helped treat some of those diplomats, coming out and saying that perhaps it's a microwave weapon. This is also a weapon, but much more portable, that shoots a beam of energy, and it can be pinpointed in the way these diplomats described both here in Cuba and in China, and that it can actually cause people to think they're hearing sounds, but this is just a symptom of this beam of energy that's being directed at people, and it can cause these kinds of symptoms. One of the researchers told CNN it causes concussion without actually causing a concussion, the immaculate concussion, they said. So again, we don't know very little bit about these weapons because so few countries use them. Cuban authorities say there's no evidence, though, that the diplomats were ever targeted here. They have called on the U.S. to release more information about this. So right now, it may be one piece of still a very big puzzle, Fred.
It is mysterious, but there are a couple things from that reporting, that there is some place of blame, or at least looking seriously at Russia. And then the other is, it's not just a very disturbing high-pitched noise, but there might even be voices or a message, a continual message that people have been victimized by, this sound, that, there's this kind of messaging coming from it. What more do we know about that, or who is adding any credence to that?
There are a number of... It's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
There are a number of countries, including the former Soviet Union and now Russia, that have microwave weapon programs going back decades. There's some evidence that they've been used in other countries against U.S. diplomats, that this was a very active program the USSR had. Again, still no evidence that they were used here, hard evidence they're used in Cuba, but it seems to fit the scenario. Now, the Cuban officials here said we would never allow this to be used, but of course, in a country like Cuba, it's impossible to imagine that a third actor could come in and use these weapons without the Cuban officials knowing. They have allowed the FBI to come in. They have allowed Canadian investigators, because there's some Canadian diplomats that have complained of similar symptoms, and they've turned up nothing. But in a way, you read about these weapons and these weapons programs that did exist, and it's kind of the perfect weapon because it leaves no trace.
Inside the Story with 60 Minutes producers Michael Ray and Oriana Zil de Granados.
Ori, Michael, you were the lead producers on this week's 60 Minutes story about U.S. diplomats who say they were attacked by a mysterious weapon that left them with brain injuries. Mm-hmm. How long have you guys been reporting this story?
I would say it's been about a year, maybe a little bit longer. We were attracted by the fact that this was a mystery that hasn't been solved, and the people who were actually victimized here had never been heard from directly. Their voices were missing in the story. So we set out to really talk to them.
So tell me, how are you feeling right now?
I'm not feeling well, not at all. I'm nauseous, dizzy, I have a headache. My equilibrium is a bit off.
strong nausea and headache and dizziness.
You have trouble retrieving words?
I do, yeah, significant trouble.
So debilitating that it feels like your head is being split open. So debilitating that I couldn't sleep. I was thinking, what is wrong with me? Something's wrong.
How did the story change for you once you heard it from the people who experienced it?
It went from being a sort of James Bond spy thriller to being actual victims, people who were really hurt, children who were hurt. That's some of the reporting that was most interesting to us, is we didn't realize how many children of diplomats were affected by this.
You believe that someone in the room above you was using some kind of a weapon to attack your family in the hotel room below.
I do.
And that they specifically targeted your children in their beds.
Yes, I do.
And could there be a cause that none of us have even considered yet?
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
You're reporting on something that's invisible. Were there moments where you had doubts about what you were hearing?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we've been doubting the story from day one, and that's part of our job. But on this story, with so many unknowns and so many questions unanswered, and just the bizarre nature of what's happened here, it was a daily occurrence. So we've been incredibly careful to check everything we can and to try to be clear with the audience about what we don't know.
What does the badge signify?
This is my Diplomatic Security Service badge. And
these are State Department and Commerce Department officials.
Put your hands on your hips and close your eyes.
And their stories are incredibly compelling. And their medical records are incredibly compelling.
In your story, you refer to these people as victims. Is it possible that they're victims of their own imaginations? Has that been raised?
So there was some reporting that was done that claimed that this was mass hysteria. There are a lot of elements here that just discount the idea of this being mass hysteria. A dog can't get sick because he thinks somebody else is getting sick.
There were nonverbal children having symptoms as well who aren't going to look around and...
They're not susceptible to mass hysteria.
You'd think.
Children and dogs.
Exactly.
The State Department sponsored treatment at the University of Pennsylvania, and they were all there in and out for the same period of time. Our understanding is that in the waiting room, they started calling each other themselves the Tinfoil Hat Club.
The Tinfoil Hat Club. What's the meaning of that? What's the joke?
It's the old trope of sort of the crazy guy who puts tinfoil on his head so the aliens can't beam, messages into his brain. It's a gallows humor. These folks are really trying to grapple with what they're dealing with.
Everyone in your broadcast story says that they were attacked while they were serving in China, but you also spoke with people who were attacked in Cuba, including one woman who speaks on camera, and she's wearing a disguise.
You have asked us not to use your name. Why is that?
Well, I mean, this isn't something that any of us really want to be known for.
She is the first victim from Cuba, a diplomat, to go on camera to tell her story.
There was an amazing pressure in my head, also pain, and it was almost paralyzing for a moment. I don't know if that was...
The way she describes the attack is very important because it matches so closely to some of the other stories we've heard.
And then you start...
Yeah.
It starts looking like a pattern.
Yeah, correct. There's definitely a pattern.
You've been concerned about keeping your identity out of this. So I wonder, why did you sit down to speak with us at all?
I really want our story to be told. I want America to know what happened to their diplomats serving overseas. And I want people who were injured in these events to come forward if they haven't come forward before, because treatment does help with the symptoms, and it's not something that you should have to live with and suffer through alone. So it's important for everyone to hear this.
You said that the pandemic is disappearing, but we lost 6,000 Americans this week, and just in this room you have dozens of people. You're not following the guidelines in New Jersey, which say you should not have more than 25.
No, they don't have to. It's a political activity.
Why are you saying such a bad example?
You're wrong on that because it's a political activity. They have exceptions, political activity, and it's also a peaceful protest. So when you have, and as you know, they asked if they could be. You know, a number of, and to me they look like they all have, pretty much all have masks on, but you know, you have an exclusion in the law. It says peaceful protest or political activity, right? In fact, specifically, yeah, it says exactly political activity or peaceful protest. And you could call it political activity, but I'd call it peaceful protest because they heard you were coming up, and they know the news is fake. They understand it better than anybody. And they asked whether or not
Agenda 21 is coming soon.
if the press in this country were honest, it wasn't corrupt, if it wasn't fake, our country would be so much further ahead. But we're doing really great. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
At the beginning of the 21st century, the Umbrella Corporation had become the largest commercial entity in the United States. 9 out of every 10 homes contain its products. Its political and financial influence is felt everywhere. In public, it is the world's leading supplier of computer technology, medical products, and healthcare. Unknown even to its own employees, its massive profits are generated by military technology, genetic experimentation, and viral weaponry.
You're all going to die down here.